Let's get into it, people. It is Friday. It's Community Beacon. I am without my co-host, Joel Simmons of the Tenacity Foundation. I know he was in. We had some logistical issues, and we should have taped this earlier, but we didn't. So here it is, Friday, 4:15, or after 4 o'clock. And if he jumps in, he can jump in at any point in time. That is the brother. This is his show, as well as it is mine. I'm just, you know, I'm consistent, baby. We all are, right? Um, but we'll get into it. I'm gonna drink some water. I was thinking, and you all could bring it up. I'm not gonna too much get into it. We can talk about, certain current events. It's been a pretty eventful week. Um, but I won't. But if you do, if you want me to talk about it, I will. Other than that, let's get into the episode. We are finishing up the principles. We're on principle 10. We finally arrived. And this is I want to say I was writing this one ties it all together. It ties a lot of the other principles in. Uh so this is great. I think the first principle, truth above all, is probably the most important principle of all. If we had to give it, from top to bottom, truth above all, is it this one is important to most people. We're talking about building something that outlives you. That's the principle. Principle says build something that outlives you. And so here's my thought process on it. I think most of us, and ultimately we're talking about legacy here. And I think most of us get legacy wrong. Like we think legacy means leaving money, right? We're hearing a lot about generational wealth. In the last 4 to 5 years, everyone's talking about generational wealth. Another thing that people think about are children, right? Your children are your legacy. And there's some truth to that. However, we find oftentimes that that's not necessarily the case. Most people can't name who their great grandfather or great grandmother is on any side. And I think we're even getting to the point where we don't even know who our grandparents are, right? So that's not it. And then maybe reputation. Uh, the thing is that most of these things, they don't stand the test of time, all within themselves, and we'll get into it. So today we're going to cut through the myths. We're going to lay the foundation. We're going to talk about what really does outlive you, and I invite you to observe this within yourself and in your family group. I'd also like, and I was going to find it and put it on here, but time ran out, is for you to go and look at the bell curve, the BD, bell distribution curve, see what average is, right? 70% of people are at least average or below average, right? So see and then we can start talking about what the average person does. Like there's not, of all them billions of people who have lived throughout time, we only talk about a certain amount of them. So when we're talking about legacy, we're going to think about some of these more important people that may have lived, or at least a story of them lives on. So we'll get into that. But I also want you to understand that most of us are just average people, right? Most of us are just average people. And chances are, if you're just consuming content, as far as the internet is concerned, because you're at the time when you can put out works, right? Like this is probably the easiest time that we know of that you can put something out and reach tens of thousands of people, which is a good, some great things are happening, and some things that you you wish didn't happen are happening. But you have a chance to do that, and most of us are not doing it. So when we look at the internet, when we're looking at this video, when we're looking on YouTube, whatever it is where you consume your content, most people aren't doing it, even though they have the opportunity to do it. as long as I forget what the movie was on Netflix when everything just went out, but barring total collapse, these things live through time. So this is an interesting principle because I think we have a chance, or I know you and I have a chance to make history within our own family group, resources, or just period, right? Because this stays online forever, and it could be a good thing, could be a bad thing. I would, especially with in light of recent events, think about the things that you are posting online. Think about the things that you're saying. People are going back and finding tweets from 10, 15, 20 years ago to cancel people, right? So these things live on forever in the cloud, the internets, right? So you're creating most of us, you at least you get a chance to do it. So now you can be a little bit more cognizant of what exactly I'm putting out, being more aware of when to talk. And, it seems to me like a lot of us use our some emotional outbreaks. Now it makes us want to put something out. And so I want you to be aware of that, right? So be aware of that. I wasn't even going to talk about that at all, but here we are. And now let me get back to it because I posted a comment on Instagram maybe 2 or 3 days ago. And after I posted a comment, it was just some random comment, something, something asking for a friend. And then someone answered what I was asking from the comment. Okay, cool. Someone went up underneath them and answered something else. And for the past 3 to 4 days, these are people that don't know each other. And I get to receive the notices that they're replying to each other. They are having an argument back and forth over probably one of the most minute things, and they're insulting each other and it's going back and forth. And I just found it interesting. I'm receiving these notifications from people who answer the comments but are now arguing within my comment. I'm just like, like, how do you have time to do this? why, why does this person mean so much to you? But alas, this is where we are. All right, I digress. um Let me see where I was at because I have notes here. So what I want to do today is I'm going to cut through the myths, lay down the foundation, talk about what really does outlive us. And along the way, I'm going to show you how legacy works in my own life, from my kids to my grandparents, and even to the hat. Right? And you've seen this hat before, but it's interesting when I started writing this. Like, why do I wear this style cap? And if you're in my family, you probably know why, right? So yeah, so legacy is both big and small. It's the truth, it's the knowledge, and most importantly to me and to you, it's the demonstration. All right, let's jump into the myth. Number one, money. Money. We'll hear, and I'm not going to stay too long on these myths, but a lot of people believe that their legacy is locked up in the money. And they talk about this generational wealth, the Bell distribution curve. S- I would, what, 90, what was it, 60 to 70% of Americans live check to check, and we're still probably, what they call the most, um, the richest planet, or forgive me, guys, the richest country. Like, we're probably, even if you were to make the 60, you're in the 60 or 7% that lives paycheck to paycheck, you're making more money than other people in other countries all around the world, right? So it's not necessarily this money that you have, but when we start to think about this generational wealth, we start to think about certain families that, the Rockefellers, used to be the Carnegies, and probably still is, or probably still are, right? Um, the Rothschilds, it comes, and these are just names that come to mind off the top of my head. Uh, and what we learned from most people is that the first generation makes it, the second generation spends it, and the third generation loses it because money fades. Heck, just inflation alone. So unless you figured out a way how to structure it correctly, which most people don't, right? And I'm in the real estate business. I can't tell you the amount of homes that are $100,000 homes, 200,000 $1 million homes that get lost through tax deeds because the family doesn't pay it, right? The surviving family members don't pay it. They don't care to pay it. You have 3, 4 people fighting over it, so on and so forth. So if you don't develop the capacity to maintain it and keep it, right? It's not about how much money you make, it's how much you keep. If you don't develop that through the understanding, then it fades. Even people who have spent millions of dollars on buildings, right? In 10, 20, 30 years, when someone comes with, you know, more money, and that institution needs it, they will take it and they'll take your name down and they'll put these other people's names on it. So it's not necessarily the money that's legacy. It can contribute to it. It can help. Money is a tool. It's a great resource to have. So I'm not telling anyone not to, accumulate money and figure out how to keep it and pass it on down. Matter of fact, do pass it on down. But it's not the ultimate. It's not everything all inclusive when it comes to the legacy. Number two is children, and children matter. But the biology alone doesn't equal legacy, right? I, I've seen people who have instilled or who have demonstrated some very powerful things within their family, or just being a certain type of person within their family. And the children don't even necessarily respect it, right? Everybody on the outside may respect it, but the children don't. And now we live in a world where, the children have two families, especially in our community, 70, 80% of kids are born out of wedlock. So now they have two separate families, two different identities. They're taking a little bit of one, they're taking a little bit of some. So for you, as far as your legacy is concerned, especially if you don't have a strong demonstration, especially on the male point of view in our community, if you don't have a strong demonstration, then that legacy is lost. We have people out here with several kids that aren't necessarily with the mothers or the mother of the kids, and the kids don't even know who they are. And like, when you look at legacy, is not, and I guess in certain religions, certain cultures, in our culture, the legacies don't really get passed down through the mother. So, um, but in the Jewish culture, it does. Number three, reputation. And this happens a lot as well, is the status, right? The chasing of the titles. I mentioned the buildings with the names on it already. Uh, Names get replaced. I was speaking recently about my grandmother. My grandmother was a devout churchgoer, right? The full days of church on Sundays, Wednesday night Bible studies. Anytime church was open, chances are my grandmother would be at the church. Um, and so, lived a long life. She passed away when she was in her 80s, and maybe after the first and did well with a lot of different people. Um, but after a certain while, people don't even remember her, right? Like there's no ward named after her for the things that she did while she was at the church. And this is not against the church. Because that's a whole different conversation. But it's just, I'm just using that as an example about the chasing of the and I'm not saying chasing of the titles, chasing of the validation, whatever it is, that these things and her reputation as a person, if it's not, if her family and her kids aren't saying anything about it, then more than likely it's not being spoken about, right? So, the people tend to think that their reputation is going to last or be their legacy. Once again, it's a part of it, right? People can speak well of these people, especially within the community, if in fact we do have a community. But it's not, it's definitely just one of the factors. So money fades, children grow, and I'm sure each child wants to build their own reputation or build their own legacy, or I would imagine. Reputations fade, but none of those things alone equal legacy, right? So these putting them together um, is what helps. So I'm gonna talk about the principle one. I said that this it was interesting as I was going through this, I was putting this together for this show. Um, that number one came back to me, and I'm glad that it did because number one should permeate through all of the principles, truth above all. And I was listening to a mentor this week and had an awesome. He was lecturing and he spoke about. He said, "You don't learn truth." He said, "You either accept it or you reject it." And then he got into talking about how all of our actions are, excuse me, any action you can have is imperfect, right? Anything that you do is going to be an imperfect action, but the being, meaning that you're aligned with the truth in this moment, that's perfect. Um, it was an interesting conversation, and the key he was getting to was like the only reason to gain knowledge, which is what we're doing now, is to come to the truth above all, and that's it. And the knowledge has to be practical and accurate because that's where my mind went when I was thinking about legacy was knowledge, like the information that you have and that you make practical and that you can pass on, like that is the legacy. But it only adds to it, right? The knowledge has to be practical and accurate. That way it serves you. And the knowledge is not the end goal. This is my mentor talking about it as we're coming to as I was preparing this stuff. And I'm just like, oh, this is cold. It's the steps that bring you face to face with the truth. And in that moment, you either accept it or reject it. Because if your legacy isn't rooted in truth, it collapses. What does that mean? That means that you need to be aligned. You need to be able to keep a legacy. You have to be able to, and this is what most people don't get. You have to teach it, right? This is what you do to your kids. You'll teach your kids or attempt to instill this. You get to preach it. I think preaching is just a little bit, it's a spiritual side of the teaching part. And you have to, more importantly, you have to demonstrate it. But all these three things have to be aligned because you'll see people who demonstrate something, but they're not necessarily teaching it or preaching it. It's definitely within their household. You see a lot more people teaching things and they're not demonstrating. And then they don't really put the spiritual aspect of the preaching into it, right? And when I'm saying preaching, it's whatever religion it is that you subscribe to. I'm not here to tell you what is and what's not. I definitely believe in the Most High, but probably not how most of you all do. But it's neither here nor there. However you decide to practice your spiritual practice. So then I said, okay, well, how do these things outlive you, right? And I want to go from the top, and I have about 5 steps, and let me see if I put these in banners. Yeah, I think I did. All right. So we'll start on number 5, which is, and this is where you start, right? This is the top, but it's not all in, it's just the brushing the surface. This is what we normally see. It's the resources, right? The money. Um, do I have it? Oh no, that's something a little bit different. But it's the resources, and so that's the money, land, assets. But only if they're built on truth, right? Because a lot of these things end up getting taken away. So if you don't really have the understanding of the money, if you don't really have an accurate understanding and practical understanding of land and these and assets, whatever they may be, they'll be quickly gone, right? And you also have to take this information and you get to instill it onto number 4, which is the people's lives that you impact. And it's not just your family, right? But anyone transformed by your presence. There are people who don't have kids but still leave a long lasting legacy. So when we're thinking about legacy, it's not just your immediate children, it's your surrounding, right? Wherever it is that you go. when we talk about my grandmother, that was one of the things that she was so very impactful with. Wherever she went, that she wherever she was, she seemed to impact people. Right, that's what people talk about her for. Number three, and this is also in the principles. If you go back to the top, I forget which one it was. It might be number four, three or four. But the systems and structures that you build, the businesses, the communities, the frameworks that live behind beyond you, like these principles, I'm demonstrating and I'm practicing and I'm teaching and I'm preaching and so much to my kids that this is the system and the structure that they can always go back to. Right, this is what I'm instilling in them, and we're having this open dialogue. um then you get to knowledge, which I think is, to me, up until this week, knowledge was number one. Maybe a couple, maybe longer than this week, but knowledge has been number one for me. The thing with knowledge is that you can never get enough of it. So knowledge is always happening. I tend to enjoy it. Me and my son were talking about our screen times on our phone. He said, "How much screen time do you have?" I said, "I don't know, man. If I were to be honest, it's probably around 13, 14. I didn't take a look at it." He's like, "Oh, that's way more than me." I said, "Well, yeah, but 90% of that screen time is me learning things. It just so happens that the things that I enjoy learning, right? I enjoy learning. I enjoy being accurate. I enjoy gaining knowledge. Um, and not just for, just consuming content for the fact of consuming content. Uh, but this knowledge piece is so, you can tell I'm enthusiastic about it. This knowledge piece is so important because, like I mentioned, if we know what to expect, because there's nothing new under the sun. So if we know what to expect and that the first generation makes it, the second generation spends it, the third generation is broke. By the third generation, they're broke. We know exactly how to kind of structure it from this point of view. What should these people be learning? Right? I've heard someone say recently, I think it was Lil Duval. He said, "Man, if I had $20 million when I turned 18," he said, "I'm so glad I didn't have $20 million when I turned 18 because I don't know what I would have did with it." And I think that's probably the the case for most people. If you had 20 million, $1 million, I remember having a conversation with Beethoven. I said, "Man, can you imagine having being in the seven, the 10, 7, 8, 9 figures, 10 being worth $10 million when you were 23, 24, 25?" And I knew him when he was 23, 24, 25. He knew me when I was 23, 24, 25. And we were very mature at 23, 24, 25. But $10 million is a whole different situation. It makes a huge difference to be going to certain, we used to do Memorial Day back in the day, going to the Memorial Day and being a millionaire. That's a different thought process. So we didn't really, even as mature as we were, and I would hope, right, that we were guided, but being that immature with that amount of money, without and immature because we didn't have the information, right? 15, 16 years ago, like I'm totally different person, right? On how I would spend money, what I spend it on, how I would structure it. Same thing now when I'm looking at the legacy, like it going through everything that I went through, or most of us go through, and paying attention and observing, and most importantly, learning the lesson and gaining not just the knowledge, but now the wisdom with it. It makes a total difference of how you're going to structure it for the future. I would look at a lot of these names. Right, really now you gotta add, our current president, the Trump name, because he's cemented that legacy in history. If you look at his father, right, a lot of people dislike him, which, that's up to you. I have no issue with the guy. Yeah, I think he's funny, to be honest. Um, and a shrewd businessman. But when you look at his father, like his father wasn't that nice of a guy. Even the Koch brothers, if you hear about their father, if you hear about John Kennedy's father, like there's the Rothschilds, the elder in that one, the guy from the 1800s. I think it's I'm not going to say who I think it is, what the name is, but when you start looking at a lot of the elders in those families and seeing how strict and disciplined and organized and structured, whether you like them or not, I'm just talking about the way that they came across when you do research on them, when you read books about them, how structured they were, and not afraid. One of my principles is that if I'm not aligned to it, uh I got to get rid of it. Alignment over attachment. They weren't attached to anything. They would they would get rid of their own, certain children if they didn't abide by these rules. A lot of us aren't built for that, right? A lot of us can't turn our backs on, certain people that we're attached to if they're not aligned with us. You got to pay attention to those things, but those people who have cemented those legacies had those principles, had those rules where everything was in alignment. Alignment solidifies your legacy. And number one, is the truth, right? The truth above all. Um, I was, and I didn't get to my cap, right? Because I'm thinking I wear this cap, and there's the reason why I wear this cap is because of my grandfather, because he wore a similar style cap. These newsy, I don't, I think that's what they're called, newsy style caps. And it's interesting because a lot of us, or people who I say come up underneath him, because a lot of the people who came up underneath him aren't necessarily his kin, but he was such a powerful figure, patriarch, which you don't really get a lot of in our communities. You see a lot of the men wearing this style cap, and it just came from like, oh, we wear it because of him. So that's a way to cement his legacy, but you're not going to get a lot of that because a lot of us weren't brought up underneath, strong men like that. So I wanted to give a couple of historical demonstrations. So I'm gonna zoom out and look at some of the greats, right? Some of the people whose legacy superseded a lot. I had, and for whatever reason, it's taken out of my notes, but you got to look at one of the strongest legacies you got has got to be Jesus Christ, right? Jesus Christ's legacy is cemented because he was aligned. Um, and everything that he did was based on the truth, right? This is not I'm just looking at the history book, the culture, probably one of the most well put together books, edited over was it 2,000 years? A book that's 2,025 years in the supposedly in the making. So you see that was built on truth, but they did edit it. So one of the things that you need in order to have a legacy, which most people won't have, that's as long lasting as that, is the ability to have powerful people who can, keep a certain narrative. All right. Um, I had a couple more, but I'm gonna leave it at that. So that's it. Principle 10, because I didn't plan on going this long, and I had a lot more on here. Uh, Money fades, title fades, even family fades if nothing's passed down. What outlives you is the truth, the knowledge that points to truth, the systems that sustain it, the people you've impacted, and most of all, what you've demonstrated within your life. So the real question you get to ask yourself, if you're starting from, it's good to start from the end and work your way there, right? Kind of reverse engineering is, what will people speak about when I'm gone? That's the legacy. That's principle number 10. All right, guys. I love you. Anything else comes to mind, I'll pop it up there. Appreciate you. And I will see you next week. And more than likely, Joel will be here. Peace.